nationwide injunction is a judicial order issued by a U.S. federal court to suspend or block the implementation of a law, policy, or administrative action, not just for the specific parties or regions involved in the case, but across the entire country. Such injunctions are typically issued by federal district court judges, even though these courts theoretically only have jurisdiction over specific geographic areas. As of March 20, 2025, exactly 2 months have passed since the start of President Trump's second term. During this time, the Trump administration has introduced bold reforms in areas such as immigration, finance, and government agency restructuring, stirring the interests of the bureaucratic system, especially those who benefit from the status quo, leading to a flood of judicial injunctions signed by federal district judges, U.S. district judges. Federal district courts have played a prominent role in lawsuits triggered by Trump's policies, particularly in issuing injunctions. Below is an analysis of the specific duties tied to the 7 injunctions you mentioned. Birthright Citizenship Injunction, issued by Boardman, Maryland, February 5, and Coffenauer, Western District of Washington, starting January 23, who ruled that the Trump administration's restrictions on birthright citizenship exceeded executive authority, resulting in nationwide injunctions. FDA and CDC reinstatement of transgender advocacy. Oversight of Administrative Procedure Act compliance, ruled by Pan, District of Columbia, March Worst, who ordered reinstatement after finding content removal lacked proper procedure. Restoration of federal funding for Biden-era projects. Protecting congressional appropriation powers, ruled by Tigar, Northern District of California, February 20, who determined the Trump administration lacked authority to cancel funding and ordered its restoration. Blocking the shutdown of USAID, reviewing whether administrative actions violated the Constitution's Appointments Clause and separation of powers, ruled by Chuang, Maryland, March 18, who barred Musk and Doge from shutting down USAID. Blocking deportation of Venezuelan illegal immigrant gang members, issued by Boasberg, District of Columbia, March 15, citing the Alien Enemies Act to block immigrant deportations. Notably, all the federal district judges issuing these nationwide injunctions were nominated and appointed by Democratic Presidents Biden and Obama. The U.S. federal court system is typically described as a 3-tier structure. Federal district courts, U.S. district courts, federal courts of appeals, U.S. courts of appeals, and the Supreme Court. To serve as a judge in this system, one must be nominated by the U.S. President and confirmed by the Senate under Article 3 of the Constitution, enjoying lifetime tenure, during good behavior, and full judicial authority to independently hear cases and issue final rulings, including injunctions. In addition to the nationwide injunctions mentioned above, Judge James E. Boasberg also issued an order on February 10, requiring the reinstatement of special counsel office officials, while Judge Theodore D. Chuang issued a separate order on March 15, blocking the Treasury Secretary from accessing financial records. As early as Trump's first term, these activist judges issued as many as 64 nationwide injunctions, more than during any other administration in history. They overturned executive orders on immigration, energy, deregulation, and national security, effectively rewriting federal policy from the courtroom. Their stance was clear. Everything done by Democratic presidents must remain in place forever, even if voters choose a different path. Now in Trump's second term, this obstruction has reached new extremes. Democrats are trying to win in court what they lost at the ballot box. But their strategy is an abuse of the legal system and is undermining the Constitution. For the past decade, Democrats have told the American public that democracy is on the ballot, spreading panic that Donald Trump might threaten voters' right to decide their own fate. Ironically, it is now the out-of-power Democrats who are exhausting every means to thwart the electorate. This includes the vast majority of the Democratic bureaucracy approving expenditures that President Trump has ordered stopped. For example, last week, FEMA attempted to pay $59 million to luxury hotels in New York to house illegal immigrants, a move now rescinded by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. For such blatant insubordination, there is a remedy, though Republican presidents, including Trump, have rarely used it before. Insubordination is grounds for dismissal. A recent poll found that 42% of deep state bureaucrats plan to resist the elected president, but they've been laughed at. Trump will wield an axe they've never seen before. And, in fact, he already has. The "our democracy" that Democrats speak of simply means democratic rule, because the vast majority of the bureaucracy is democratic, so they must have enough freedom to do what Democrats want. This raises the same question. Why does a lawfully elected president need a reason to fire anyone? Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution states plainly, "The executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America." Not in so-called independent agencies, not in entrenched deep state bureaucrats, and certainly not in other branches of government. If the elected leader cannot fulfill the duties granted by the Constitution, then why bother holding elections at all? The judiciary was never meant to become an unelected, unaccountable superlegislature. Yet, with the weaponization of nationwide injunctions, it has become just that. Democrats have discovered they can file lawsuits with carefully selected activist judges who will reliably issue sweeping, legally dubious injunctions to freeze executive action. America's founding fathers would surely be appalled at the idea that an unelected judge could dictate national policy. Article 3 courts were established to resolve disputes between specific parties, not to issue nationwide edicts overriding the elected branches of government. Yet, over the past few decades, nationwide injunctions have become a tool of leftist control, allowing activist judges to strike down entire policy agendas with the stroke of a pen. This practice lacks constitutional grounding. Historically, injunctions were far more limited in scope. The Supreme Court itself has never endorsed the idea that a single district judge has the authority to impose a universal legal rule on the entire nation. Justice Clarence Thomas has explicitly warned that nationwide injunctions have little basis in historical practice, and raise serious questions about the scope of courts' equitable powers under Article 3. For years, these Democrat-appointed activist judges have weaponized the judiciary, issuing nationwide injunctions to paralyze the executive branch and nullify presidential authority. These injunctions, legal orders from a single federal district judge blocking federal policy enforcement anywhere in the country, are a modern leftist invention. Under Democratic administrations, they were a judicial weapon to persecute political opponents. Under Republican ones, they've evolved into a judicial coup to suppress effective governance by the elected leader. The unchecked power of district judges isn't just a theoretical issue. It has real, catastrophic consequences for governance. When a single judge can freeze a policy nationwide, it doesn't just delay implementation. It effectively kills the policy entirely. This judicial lawfare is not just a procedural abuse. It's a genuine constitutional crisis. It must be addressed. One viable solution is for the Supreme Court to require that any nationwide injunction against the executive branch be approved by a panel of at least 3 district court judges, rather than just one. This would introduce an additional layer of scrutiny and reduce forum shopping and the ability of unelected partisan activists to dictate national policy. Alternatively, expedite Supreme Court review. Any nationwide injunction against the executive branch should automatically and immediately be appealed to the Supreme Court. This would prevent the current legal limbo where bad faith injunctions delay policy implementation for months or years until overturned. Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis offered a more direct answer. Regarding the legal challenges currently obstructing parts of President Trump's agenda, DeSantis suggested that Congress could strip federal courts of jurisdiction. Congress has the authority to strip jurisdiction of the federal courts to decide these cases in the first place. The sabotaging of President Trump's agenda by resistance judges was predictable. Why no jurisdiction stripping bills teed up at the onset of this Congress? DeSantis wrote in a Wednesday post on X. When someone responded by asking how such a move could pass when 60 votes would be needed to push it through the Senate, DeSantis replied, "Attach it to a must-pass bill." DeSantis floated the idea of stripping federal courts of jurisdiction when replying to a tweet from Repairers Chip Roy, R. Texas. Lots of noise about impeachment. We must study every ruling and act accordingly, everything on the table, noting 14 Dem votes required in Senate. but more fertile ground. 1. House can pass a resolution stating there was an invasion. 2. We can defund radical courts, Roy had posted. In a Truth Social post on Tuesday, Trump called for the impeachment of a judge, apparently referring to Judge James E. Boasberg of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. This radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker and agitator who was sadly appointed by Barack Hussein Obama, was not elected president, Trump declared in the post. This judge, like many of the crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached. We don't want vicious, violent, and demented criminals, many of them deranged murderers, in our country. In a sense, the controversy over nationwide injunctions issued by district judges is evolving into a true battle over power. The crux of the issue lies in amplified power. A single district judge, out of 94 federal district courts nationwide, can unilaterally freeze national policy, giving them influence far beyond their traditional jurisdiction. Critics argue this is entirely inconsistent with the layered structure of judicial power in the Constitution's design. Risk of abuse. Some see these injunctions as political weapons. Data shows at least 64 nationwide injunctions during Trump's first term, compared to just 12 over Obama's 8 years, suggesting their frequency correlates with political opposition. Judicial chaos. If judges in different regions issue conflicting rulings on the same policy, one blocks, another allows, it creates confusion over which law applies. Who decides? Lack of constitutional basis. Opponents note that neither the Constitution nor historical precedent explicitly authorizes these nationwide effect judicial orders, viewing them as a modern judicial invention. These injunctions have made federal courts a focal point of policy battles. Simply put, nationwide injunctions are a magnifying glass, amplifying the voice of a single judge, but also amplifying the controversy. Whether this is judicial restraint or judicial overreach depends on where you stand. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to leave us a comment. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.